The scene in our text takes place in a dark morning, the first day of the week after the Sabbath, with Mary Magdalene coming to the cemetery. Cemeteries can be places that seem like prisons. Cemeteries are places that dreams are locked away. Cemeteries are places that hold hostage to us. Cemeteries are places that slam shut the door on the future. The motivational speaker Miles Monroe once said that the wealthiest place on earth are cemeteries because they house so many deferred dreams, so many half-lived hopes, so many vanished visions. Maybe that's why we visit the graveyard, and it's often accompanied by cries of anguish rather than shouts of joy. The adventures of Jesus, which began in a cradle in Bethlehem, were ruined on a cross on Calvary, and really appeared to have ended in a borrowed tomb that was owned by Joseph of Arimathea. Mary went to the cemetery that first Easter morning, expecting only to find the bruised and broken corpse of Jesus. Mary is one of the several women in the Bible who traveled with Jesus and his disciples. John tells us in John's gospel that she made her way to the cemetery while it was still dark. The reference to the dark may have been to the time of the day, or it could have been a reference to the blindness of her faith. It's not really clear. But what seems to be clear in the text, however, is that no one loved Jesus more than Mary. Jesus had done something for her that no one else could have done. And for that, she never, ever forgot. Jesus had set her free from an evil spirit, and because of that, Mary not only became a devout follower of Jesus, but she also became a supporter of Jesus' ministry and the disciples that Jesus led. How devastating it must have been for Mary to see the one who had set her free, the one who had changed her life so completely, die such a painful death. To watch Jesus hanging on that cross that Friday afternoon must have broken Mary's heart. Perhaps Mary feared now that since Jesus is dead, the demons that once possessed her would return, and she would go back to being the way she was before she met Jesus. Mary was full of grief. Mary was full of loss. And Mary was probably plagued by some of the same questions that you and I have when we faced with the unexpected, untimely death of a person that is pregnant with potential and promise. What a shame. What a loss. What a tragedy. Unfortunately, we have used those words throughout history time and time again. What a shame, what a loss, what a tragedy at the assassination and murder of President John F. Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Princess Diana. The tragic, senseless, premature death of Whitney Houston, Selena Gomez, Michael Jackson, Prince, and most recently, Nipsey Hussle. After the death of Jesus that Friday, many of his followers probably felt that evil had done him in. His dreams had turned into nightmare. The movement had come to a standstill. Hopes had turned into despair. Hands that once healed the sick bore scars from the nails that held them to the cross. Eyes that were full of grace and truth were now fixed and stared in dismay. The voice which calmed the sea was now silenced and stilled because of death. After surviving the unthinkable horrors of Friday, early that first morning, while it was still dark, the text tells us that Mary, who was last one at the cross, was the first one at the tomb. She probably went to see Jesus one last time, to say one last goodbye to Jesus. The part that loves play in the story is extraordinary. For it was Mary who loved Jesus so much, who first appeared at the tomb, and it was John, the disciple whom Jesus loved so much, who first appeared at the resurrection of Jesus. The whole story really is filled with signs of love, God's love for humankind in sending Jesus to die for us. Mary's love for Jesus in going to the cemetery. You see, love is a stubborn and persistent decision that goes on through disaster. Love goes on through disappointment. Love keeps on going up even when there are no barriers, or when there are barriers and when there are black blockades. Love keeps on going. And despite the fact that Jesus was already dead and described as never to come alive again, Mary could not stop loving. Mary couldn't stay away. Mary's love and her faithfulness to Jesus woke her up early that morning and pushed her out and drove her to the cemetery before dawn. The same stubborn love put tears in her eyes and sadness in her heart as she came to that human place where there was nothing to do but weep. For when you arrived at the tomb, Mary, she couldn't roll away the stone. The tomb was already empty, and the body of Jesus was gone. Yet another critical blow to Mary. She saw him die. She watched him being crucified. She saw them take him away, but when she arrived at the tomb, his body was gone. Mary is intense with passion and intense with grief. Went into a long string of disorder, turmoil, and confusion. Mary ran back to the disciples with the news, "They have taken my Lord." The helplessness that she experienced once again opened the footage of tears that flowed from her eyes, because there was nothing Mary could do. Mary felt powerless. A basic fear and sadness of human is that of powerlessness. Because there's so much in our world today, sometimes, and in our lives today, there's so much which seems at times to have control over us. So much going on that sometimes seems that we have little control over. We didn't choose the family into which we were born. We couldn't control our genetics for the most part, or our inherited tendencies. We had no power over the way we were raised as children. We can't control changes in our lives sometimes and choices of our loved ones, so much that we seem not to have control over. And that's what Mary felt when she got to that tomb. I had no control over his death, and now I have no control over where they've taken him. And at times we even feel powerless in the face of so much that threatens our air, our water, our neighborhood, our cities, and our world. And none of us can control or stop the inevitable advances of aging. I don't care how pretty you are. I don't care how young you are. I don't care how smart you are, I don't care how much money you have, none of us can control the inevitable advances of old age. Mary was not exempt from those feelings of powerlessness. The powers of evil were too great and more than Mary could handle. They were more than Mary could control. And Mary said, whoever they were, they had won. Evil had won. They won when he went to trial before the Pilate. They won when they nailed him on the cross. They won when he died. They won when they laid him in the grave. And now they've won by taking his body away. They've won. And then comes the angel's question. Why are you weeping, Mary? It seems such an inept, cruel, needless question. Why are you weeping, Mary? Why are you weeping? Why ask such a question in a cemetery? Aren't cemeteries places where people cry? Aren't cemeteries places where people weep? Aren't cemeteries the scene of an earthly separation? Aren't cemeteries silent places where loved ones and friends no longer speak back to us? Aren't cemeteries cold places where love is chilled? Don't we write the end at the cemetery? Don't we write finished at the cemetery? Don't we write it's over at the cemetery? When all hope appears to be lost, what else is there to do? What choice is there but to weep? Mary could have asked the angels, why not weep? Haven't you been paying attention? Don't you read your blogs? Didn't you see that tweet? Didn't you catch the news on the internet? Didn't you listen to the radio? Didn't you watch on television? Haven't you noticed that the powers of evil are out of control? What else is there to do but weep? A short time before Mary and the other disciples had been playing Follow the Leader with Jesus. They'd been running through the graveyards, tumbling and thumbing up their nose at death. Jesus had dared them to imagine a different world. Jesus had dared them to imagine a world where scarcity was proven false and where we helped one another and loved one another and cared for one another. Jesus had challenged them to envision a world like that, but now Jesus is dead. Jesus is gone. Mary, that game is over. Their team had lost. And the graveyard was really just a reminder of the human capacity and the bondage of the powers of death. That's what Mary is thinking. She's in defeat. She's in death. She's in despair. But even while there seemed to be nothing more Mary could do, that didn't mean the game was over. For unseen in the question, why are you weeping, is a question of faith. And as Mary sat there in the cemetery weeping, the one she had mistaken as the gardener called her. Peering through her tears, peering through her agony, peering through her pain, peering through her perplexity, Jesus called her. And Mary recognized Jesus. She realized that God was still in the game. She realized that the game wasn't over. It was too good not to be true. The power of death had not won. She realized that there was a greater power than death. For Jesus was there alive. Alive in the cemetery. And Mary's pain and Mary's weeping had turned into joy because Jesus was alive. Voice was filled with joy because Jesus was alive. There in that cemetery, in the midst of despair, In the midst of hopelessness, Mary realized something. That there was still something she could do. Because Jesus lives, she could live. There in that cemetery, Mary realized something, that Easter does not return her to the past, but rather Easter opens up a new future. There in that cemetery, Mary's weeping was turned to joy in that cemetery. Mary, first at the cemetery, first to announce the missing body and first to see the risen Christ, she ran. Can I demonstrate? I feel like they sang about she ran. I don't run anymore because my knees hurt. So I started cycling just to relieve some of the pressure, but she ran. She had some good news to tell. I got to tell you something. Jesus is alive. I bet some of you would run if someone was selling a Maserati for $1 on the street. I bet some of you would run if you could meet some famous actor or some famous athlete. I bet you'd run to them. She said, I got to tell you something. Jesus is alive. She ran. I've seen the Lord, she said. Mary discovered a new purpose. Mary discovered a new possibility. Mary discovered a new power. And that's what the resurrection is all about. In raising Jesus from the dead, God's love is demonstrated as God broke the bondage of evil and sin in our lives. Raising Jesus from the dead, God said, there's nothing that can hold you captive. There's nothing that can keep you in the grave. There's nothing that can kill you. If I can raise Jesus from the dead, I can lift you up. Oh my gosh. That was an amen point and y'all missed it. You want me to say it again so you get it on cue? There is nothing that can hold you down. You see, the hope of the resurrection. The hope of the resurrection is that this world is not just for Jesus. Jesus didn't just die and was raised from the dead to be able to say, Jesus is alive. But somebody in here needs to become alive today. Alive in your witness, alive in your joy, alive in your life, alive in your testimony. Somebody needs to come alive today. Turn to your neighbor and say, is it you? I didn't hear you. Turn to the person on the other side and say, is it you? With tears streaming down her face, Mary ran. She ran through the cemeteries. She ran through the streets. She ran down PCH, ran down Sunset, ran through the Pentagon and the Capitol, ran through the boardroom, the operating room, the courthouse, the classroom. Preach, Kenneth. I'm doing the best I can. She ran. She said, I got to tell somebody. I said I wasn't going to keep it to myself, but I got to tell somebody. That's my challenge for you today. Will you run and tell somebody Jesus is alive? Will you run and tell somebody Jesus is alive? You gonna tell daddy? Tell mommy and daddy and all your friends in school? Tell your neighbor? Tell your coworker? Tell your business partner. Tell your spouse. Tell your partner. Tell your friend. Tell the person that's going to serve you at the restaurant you're taking me to brunch to after this service. Tell everybody that Jesus is alive. Amen. Hi, I'm Kenneth Davis, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for worshiping with us today via the internet. We hope to be an inviting community here at Palisades Lutheran Church where all are welcome, regardless of age, race, or even socioeconomic background. We pray that this message was a blessing to you and that you will take an opportunity to come out and be with us one Sunday morning. We're located at 15905 West Sunset Boulevard on the corner of Sunset and El Medio. And also, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We do a video every week. Look forward to seeing you in worship next Sunday. And again, thank you for worshiping with us today.